Hi guys, we are going to start lesson one for our unit Flowers for Algernon today. And by the end of our unit, you're going to have read several pieces of text, literary and informational, about knowledge and intelligence. We're going to look at different theories of intelligence and explore how different authors use traditional stories to develop characters and themes to teach us about ourselves and others. So one of the things that we're going to have to think about in our unit is how Charlie changes from the beginning of Flowers for Algernon and how the surgery that Charlie has either improves or worsens his life. Today we're going to begin by looking at a Greek myth, the story of Prometheus. And you'll be using sections 1 and 2 of the story of Prometheus from Old Greek Stories by James Baldwin. It's on page 9 in that yellow book that I gave you on Friday, your student materials handbook. And then there's going to be a summary template handout on page 8 in your yellow student materials book as well. So first of all, the story of Prometheus is a source text for Flowers for Algernon, which means the main text of the unit, Flowers for Algernon, draws on information from the story of Prometheus to help illustrate the point. Many authors will use elements and ideas from famous texts like Greek myths and religious literature, such as the Bible. The myths and religious literature are known as source texts because they are a source which modern writers use as a basis for writing a new text. Modern writers sometimes will use and modify elements and ideas from those texts, such as characters, events, or themes in their new text. They do this to elaborate on the story by giving it modern elements, to give readers a new look at an old story, or to teach us a new lesson. As I read aloud the first part of the story of Prometheus, pay close attention to the characters, events, and themes, because when we read Flowers for Algernon, you will likely see some similarities. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to exit out of this screen. I'm going to pull up the myth. You can follow along with me in your student materials handbook if you want to, but I'm going to pull the myth up on the screen as well. The story of Prometheus, how fire was given to men. In those old times, there lived two brothers who were not like other men, nor yet like those mighty ones who lived upon the mountaintops. They were the sons of one of those Titans who had fought against Jupiter and been sent in chains to the strong prison house of the lower world. The name of the elder of these brothers was Prometheus, or Forethought, for he was always thinking of the future and making things ready for what might happen tomorrow or next week or next year, or it may be in 100 years to come. The younger was called Epimetheus, or Afterthought, for he was always so busy thinking of yesterday or last year or 100 years ago that he had no care at all for what might come to pass after a while. For some cause, Jupiter had not sent these brothers to prison with the rest of the Titans. Prometheus did not care to live amid the clouds on the mountaintop. He was too busy for that. While the mighty folk were spending their time in idleness, drinking nectar and eating ambrosia, he was intent upon plans for making the world wiser and better than it had ever been before. He went out amongst men to live with them and help them, for his heart was filled with sadness when he found that they were no longer happy, as they had been during the golden days when Saturn was king. Ah, how very poor and wretched they were! He found them living in caves and in holes of the earth, shivering with the cold because there was no fire, dying of starvation, hunted by wild beasts and by one another, the most miserable of all living creatures. If they only had fire, said Prometheus to himself, they could at least warm themselves and cook their food. And after a while, they could learn to make tools and build themselves houses. Without fire, they are worse off than the beasts. Then he went boldly to Jupiter and begged him to give fire to men, so that they might have a little comfort through the long, dreary months of winter. Not a spark will I give, said Jupiter. No, indeed. Why, if men had fire, they might become strong and wise like ourselves. And after a while, they would drive us out of our kingdom. Let them shiver with cold, and let them live like a beast. It is best for them to be poor and ignorant, that so we mighty ones may thrive and be happy. Prometheus made no answer, but he had set his heart on helping mankind, and he did not give up. He turned away and left Jupiter and his mighty company forever. As he was walking by the shore of the sea, he found a reed, or as some say, a tall stalk of fennel, growing. And when he had broken it off, he saw that its hollow center was filled with a dry, soft pith, which would burn slowly and keep on fire for a long time. He took the long stalk in his hands and started with it toward the dwelling of the sun in the far east. Mankind shall have fire in spite of the tyrant who sits on the mountaintop, he said. He reached the place of the sun in the early morning, just as the glowing golden orb was rising from the earth and beginning his daily journey through the sky. He touched the end of the long reed to the flame, and the dry pith caught on fire and burned slowly. Then he turned and hastened back to his own land, carrying with him the precious spark hidden in the hollow center of the plant. He called some of the shivering men from their caves and built a fire for them and showed them how to warm themselves by it and how to build other fires from the coals. Soon there was a cheerful blaze in every rude home in the land, and men and women gathered round it and were warm and happy and thankful to Prometheus for the wonderful gift which he had brought to them from the sun. It was not long until they learned to cook their food and so to eat like men instead of beasts. They began at once to leave off their wild and savage habits. And instead of lurking in the dark places of the world, they came out into the open air and the bright sunlight and were glad because life had been given to them. After that, Prometheus taught them little by little 1,000 things. He showed them how to build houses of wood and stone, and how to tame sheep and cattle and make them useful, and how to plow and sow and reap, and how to protect themselves from the storms of winter and the beasts of the woods. Then he showed them how to dig in the earth for copper and iron, and how to melt the ore, and how to hammer it into shape and fashion from it the tools and weapons from which they needed in peace and war. And when he saw how happy the world was becoming, he cried out, "A new golden age shall come, brighter and better by far than the old." So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at the chart that is in your student materials handbook on page 8, and it's asking you to basically summarize what we just read. So it looks like this summary template right here is what it looks like. And it wants you to first fill in the text title and author. So in this case, the text title and author is The Story of Prometheus by, and if we go back and we look, the author is James Baldwin. James Baldwin. So it asks for you to talk about who the characters are, which characters are the main characters. So in the main part of the story that we've looked at so far, the main characters would be, of course, Prometheus. We have mankind. We have Jupiter. Those would be our main characters. What do the characters want to accomplish? Well, Prometheus wants to give fire to mankind. Jupiter doesn't really have anything he's wanting to accomplish here. Prometheus is really wanting to accomplish something here. When we look at the but, we get to the conflict or the problem that the main character has, and this is where Jupiter presents a problem. A problem for Prometheus because he forbids Prometheus from giving fire to mankind. What did the main character do in response to this problem? Well, Prometheus gives fire to mankind and teaches them how to use fire to make their lives easier. And how does the conflict resolve itself? Well, we don't really know how the story ends yet, but at this point in the story, Prometheus is happy to have given fire to mankind and ushered in a new golden age. Remember, he talks about that golden age at the end of our section. So what you're going to do next is, I don't want you to do this summary of the text yet. I want you to read the second section of the story. And then you're going to come back to your summary template and you're going to add in the rest of the information from the second section. When you have done that, then combining the two, you're going to write me a summary of the text using the details above. Now remember, a summary is supposed to be shorter than the original text. Try to make your summary in about 5 or 6 sentences total. That's all we're looking for. And you'll write that in your student materials handbook. And then I'm going to put a place for you to type your summary into Google Classroom. So if we go back to our assignment here, again, you're going to read the second section of the story of Prometheus. Independently complete the rest of the summary template. So in our lesson, you will have read the myth of Prometheus, and you also learned a little about Pandora, and you're going to have learned how to write a summary of a literary text. If you have any questions, send me an email. Let me know how you're doing, and then I'll see your summary answer in Google Classroom. I hope you guys have a great day.